Hi everyone, welcome back to Poetology. I'm Dan and this is the second part in my series on paper poetry journals. A while ago I posted a video on paper magazines that you can read or send your poems to, and I covered some of the major UK and international magazines such as Poetry London, The Rialto, The Poetry Review, Magma, and Modern Poetry in Translation. So if you're interested in these, hop over to the other video first. And today I have another 6 paper poetry journals or literary journals that feature poetry to present to you. I'll start with the ones that focus solely on poetry, and the best example of this is Butcher's Dog. Butcher's Dog is a poetry journal that started in 2012. It's one of the most recent of the series I'm going to show you, and it comes out twice a year in spring and autumn. Its aim is to publish distinctive and diverse writers from the UK and Ireland, and it is based in Newcastle. And it also has themed anthologies. What I really like about this magazine is it doesn't have a spine, unlike the others, so it looks like a smaller publication, but it's actually a major name in the poetry world, and it solely publishes poems. So from page 1 to the last page, right after the editor's note, the whole journal is just poetry. Just poem, 1 per page. A very simple but efficient model. If you're just interested in reading poems, this is one of the best for you. I say alongside the Rialto, which also gives most of its space to poetry, to a certain extent Magma, but less so. It's one of the most poetry-focused publications. I found a new poet that I really like is Jonathan Kinsman, who wrote a poem titled Werewolf, and it's so close to some of the things I've been thinking about. I really appreciate it. So that's for Butcher's Dog. And here we've got Tears in the Fens. Is it Tears? Tears in the Fens. It started in 1984. It is a biannual publication. It publishes poetry, prose poetry, fiction, non-fiction, reviews, and essays. They cover established writers, and they are an international publication. If you flick through it, you can see a lot of it covers essays and reviews. About half of it is fiction and poetry. So you will get some more like prose poetry pieces like this, some more traditional poems, longer short stories as well. If you like to sample different types of writing and to read a variety, then this is a really good one. Now, Poetry Wales is also solely focused on poetry, but it publishes features and reviews as well. It's a tri-annual publication that started in 1965. It is the national Welsh poetry magazine, and it comes out in print and digital. I think all of these have amazing covers, and they also publish art. So if you look at the layout of this magazine, you can see a variety of pieces. Here's a long poem by Verity Spot, for example, over 5 pages. There are reviews, and there's also art, actually, visual arts, and a lot of poems. Like Butcher's Dog, it focuses on poetry, but unlike Butcher's Dog, it has maybe more variety with visuals and other types of features. Now, another very well-known publication is the PN Review. It used to be called Poetry Nation, and it started in 1973. It now has 6 publications a year, so that's a lot of magazines coming out for this sort of sector. Most of them have 2 to 4 a year, 6 a year is a lot. So it's a very prolific literary journal. And although the PN Review is focused on poetry, it features editorials, letters, news, articles, reviews and translations, which means that when you flick through it, there is quite a lot of space taken up by longer features. So if you like to read articles about poetry, as well as the poems themselves, this is good. In some ways, the model is like what you find in Poetry London, which has a similar format, is a little thinner, and also has long features as well as poems. It means there's a bit less space for poems, which may mean it's a little harder to get published in it as well. But these are very renowned, excellent quality publications. So if you want to know a bit more about the discussions around poetry and not just poems, then these reviews are a very good option. I really enjoyed reading this issue of Ambit. Ambit has poems, stories, and artwork. It started in 1959, so it's the oldest, I think, of the publications I'm showing you today. Like Magma, it often uses guest editors, which means you get a lot more variety in the focus of the issue and the type of poems, and that's something I've really come to appreciate. It has 4 editions a year. There is also a podcast which you can access from their website. They have competitions. Recently there was a magic competition. I'm really looking forward to reading what comes out of this, reading the competition winners. That's definitely an issue I don't want to miss. With these 4 publications, they have 2 publications a year that are made of unsolicited submissions, which means that's somewhere where there's a better chance of getting picked up. And they have 2 where it's competition winners. So those issues are focused on the theme of the competition and they feature the winners, and they're excellent quality. What I liked about it is the look of it. It looks a bit more DIY, even though it's a major publication. Don't be led astray by this. So this was a prize-centered issue. There are stories that were published as the first prize. There is art that got the prize. There was poetry that got the prize. And then you get a decent selection of poetry after that, and also innovative pieces that use a different format, presented in the other direction on the page. And the artwork is also surprising and often stunning. So I think this is a very refreshing publication, and as I said, I really loved reading this. It was the most unexpected for me and brought new ideas. Finally, this is the White Review. The White Review calls itself an arts and literature magazine. It is published 3 times a year, but there are monthly editions on the website. It started in 2011, so it's slightly more recent. And they borrowed the name from a Parisian magazine that no longer runs called La Revue Blanche, and they feature reviews, articles, fiction, and poetry, and they're very international in scope. So for example, here there's an interview with Sarah Ahmed, poetry by Fahad Alamoudi, and then The Inheritors by Ariel Saramandi, then an interview. So again, you get lots of different features. Each article does something a little different. You start with the interview, you read a bit of poetry, you've got a longer feature here, then an interview, then you get some artwork, etc. It also looks very good. The print quality is excellent, and it's a thicker magazine, much thicker than the others, so you really feel like you're holding something. And it features major names, as I said, Sarah Ahmed. There's another interview with Siri Husvet. High quality publication that is worth spending some time with. It's great if you want to, I don't know, take something on a trip, for example, because you're sure you won't run out of reading. You will get a mixture of poetry, fiction, and more reflexive pieces, like interviews and feature articles, and you get variety in the articles published. Thinking about some of my favorites, at different times I've had subscriptions first to the Rialto, which to me was accessible, had a lot of poetry, and inspired me to think of it in new ways. Then I had Poetry London as well for a while, and it gave me a bit more of the theory around poetry and some of the discussions that were going on in the poetry world, especially London-based, UK-based. But it gave me a broader view of some of the topics that were going on. So I think something like this, or the White Review, or the PN Review, and perhaps Poetry Wales will provide this. Then I think for a couple of years at least, I also had a subscription to the Poetry Review. And again, similarly, the Poetry Review has a lot of poems, which I enjoy, but it also has some longer essays and reviews that give you a broader view of this. If I was to get subscriptions now, I would go for Magma and Ambit, because I find both of these very refreshing, and they have a bit of an edge maybe over some of the more established magazines, and especially the ones that run with the same editors for years on end. So even though there's always a fresh take or new poets brought in, there's something about the type of focus that stays the same. If you love the poetry that they publish, that works really well for you. But I enjoy magazines that use guest editors, because with each guest editor you have a fresh focus, a different selection of poets, and new ideas. Especially when it's theme-based, it creates an environment where poets can submit different work, something that they would not necessarily be able to publish in an unthemed issue. That's just my current take on this. I think it evolves over time. I just thought I'd share this to help some of you find out what you would be drawn to. Let me know what magazines you like, whether you have any subscriptions to poetry magazines, and whether there are other magazines that I should think of and feature. I hope to hear from you in the comments. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and I look forward to seeing you again very soon. Bye!